Imagine a place where trust is a given, a high school classroom where students believe they are safe, and teachers are there to guide them. But what happens when that trust is shattered? What if the person meant to protect and educate becomes the one to fear the most? Today, we dive into the chilling tale of a high school teacher whose obsession with a student spiraled into a fatal encounter. This isn't just a story about a crime, it's about the fine line between admiration and obsession, and the deadly consequences when that line is crossed. Mr. Robert Hughes was the kind of teacher everyone admired. Charming, dedicated, and always willing to help, he quickly became a favorite among students and faculty alike. He taught English literature, filling his lessons with passion and depth that made even the most reluctant readers pay attention. To the outside world, he was the epitome of a perfect teacher, someone who cared deeply about his students' success. But behind this facade, Mr. Hughes was harboring a dark secret. In the middle of the school year, a new student named Emily Thompson transferred to the high school. Emily was bright, ambitious, and everything that Mr. Hughes admired in a student. At first, it seemed like Mr. Hughes was just taking an extra interest in helping her adjust to the new school. He offered to tutor her after school, gave her extra resources, and constantly praised her work in class. But as the weeks passed, it became clear that his interest in Emily was far from professional. As the semester wore on, Emily began to notice that Mr. Hughes' behavior was becoming more intrusive. He started texting her outside of school hours, at first with innocent messages about her schoolwork, but then the messages became more personal. He would comment on how she looked, ask about her personal life, and express his admiration for her in ways that made Emily uncomfortable. Emily confided in her best friend, Sarah, who urged her to report Mr. Hughes. But Emily was conflicted. Mr. Hughes was popular, well-respected, and she worried that no one would believe her. Plus, he hadn't done anything overtly inappropriate, yet. So, she decided to keep quiet, hoping that if she distanced herself, the problem would go away. But Mr. Hughes had other plans. Mr. Hughes noticed Emily pulling away, and it only fueled his obsession. He started finding excuses to keep her after class, insisting that she needed extra help with her assignments. During these sessions, his behavior became more erratic. He would sometimes get too close, his compliments becoming more like confessions of love. Emily's discomfort grew into fear. She tried to avoid him, but it seemed like Mr. Hughes was always watching, always waiting. He began following her around the school, showing up at places he had no reason to be. Emily felt trapped, her every move monitored by the man she had once thought was her mentor. Unable to take it any longer, Emily finally gathered the courage to confront Mr. Hughes. She told him in no uncertain terms that his behavior was inappropriate and that it needed to stop. But instead of backing off, Mr. Hughes snapped. The idea of losing Emily, of being rejected, sent him into a spiral of despair and rage. One evening, after school hours, Mr. Hughes sent Emily a message, begging her to meet him in his classroom. Emily, terrified but determined to put an end to the madness, agreed, hoping she could reason with him one last time. What she didn't know was that Mr. Hughes had no intention of letting her go. When Emily arrived, the atmosphere was tense. Mr. Hughes was no longer the charming teacher she knew. His eyes were wild, his demeanor threatening. He pleaded with Emily to give him a chance, to not ruin his life. But when Emily stood firm, insisting that she wanted nothing to do with him, something in Mr. Hughes snapped. In a fit of rage, he lunged at her. Emily tried to fight back, but Mr. Hughes overpowered her. The struggle was intense, and in a moment of madness, he struck Emily, ending her life. As the reality of what he had done set in, Mr. Hughes was left alone with the consequences of his obsession. The next morning, the school was in chaos. Emily's disappearance was the talk of the town, and it wasn't long before the truth came out. Mr. Hughes, unable to live with his guilt, turned himself in. The community was shocked, a beloved teacher revealed as a predator, a young life taken too soon. Mr. Hughes was charged with murder, and the trial that followed was a media sensation. Former students came forward, sharing stories of their own unsettling experiences with him, painting a picture of a man whose obsession with power and control had been brewing for years. Emily's parents were devastated. Their daughter, who had so much potential, was gone. The community mourned, struggling to reconcile the image of the teacher they once admired with the monster he had become. Mr. Hughes was sentenced to life in prison, but the damage he had done was irreparable. This tragic story is a reminder that evil can hide in plain sight, even behind the smile of a beloved teacher. It's a lesson in the importance of speaking up, of trusting your instincts, and of the devastating consequences when obsession is allowed to fester unchecked. The small town where Emily lived was never the same after her death. The once thriving high school became a symbol of tragedy and loss. Parents were hesitant to send their children back to a place where such a horrific event had occurred. The students who remained were haunted by the memory of their friend and classmate, and the hallways that were once filled with laughter now echoed with silence. Mr. Hughes' trial was quick but intense. The evidence against him was overwhelming: text messages, eyewitness accounts, and his own confession. The jury took only a few hours to find him guilty of first-degree murder. As he was led away in handcuffs, there was no trace of the charismatic teacher who had once inspired so many. Instead, there was only a broken man, consumed by his own twisted desires. Emily's death didn't just affect her family and friends, it sent shockwaves through the entire community. The school district implemented new policies to prevent something like this from happening again. Teachers were required to undergo additional training, focusing on maintaining appropriate boundaries with students. The administration encouraged students to report any behavior that made them uncomfortable, promising that their concerns would be taken seriously. But for many, these changes came too late. Emily's parents, John and Lisa Thompson, were left with a gaping hole in their lives that could never be filled. They became advocates for change, speaking out about the dangers of teacher-student relationships and pushing for stricter laws to protect students from predators. Their grief was a constant reminder of the price they had paid for these reforms. As the community tried to heal, more stories began to surface about Mr. Hughes. Former students came forward with their own experiences, revealing that Emily wasn't the first student he had fixated on. Several young women shared stories of inappropriate comments, lingering touches, and uncomfortable encounters that they had dismissed at the time. They hadn't realized the danger they were in, but looking back, the signs were clear. These revelations only deepened the community's sense of betrayal. How had a man like Mr. Hughes been allowed to teach for so long without anyone realizing what he was capable of? The school board conducted an internal investigation, but it was little comfort to those who had been affected by his actions. Years passed, but the memory of Emily and the tragic events that unfolded continued to linger. The school eventually moved on, new teachers and students filling the classrooms, but the shadow of the past was never far away. Emily's story became a cautionary tale, a reminder to future generations of the importance of vigilance and the dangers of unchecked power. John and Lisa Thompson continued their advocacy work, turning their pain into a mission to protect other children from the same fate as their daughter. They established a scholarship in Emily's name, awarded to students who demonstrated both academic excellence and a commitment to community service, qualities that Emily had embodied. The tragedy of Emily's death serves as a powerful reminder that evil can take many forms, even those that seem trustworthy and familiar. It's a story of a life taken too soon, of a community forced to confront its own complacency, and of the enduring impact one person's actions can have on countless lives. As you reflect on this story, consider the lessons it teaches us about trust, power, and the importance of speaking out. Have you ever felt uncomfortable in a situation but didn't know how to respond? Or perhaps you know someone who's been in a similar position? Let us know in the comments below. Your stories could help others who might be struggling with the same fears. And remember, if you found this story impactful, share it with your friends and family. By spreading awareness, we can all play a part in preventing such tragedies from happening again. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more stories that shed light on the darkest corners of human nature. As we close this chapter, I want to hear your thoughts. What would you have done if you were in Emily's shoes? Have you ever experienced something similar? Share your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to share this video with your friends who might be interested. This story is a stark reminder of the dangers that can lurk even in the most trusted places. If you found this story compelling, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more gripping true crime stories. Stay safe, and remember, sometimes the people you trust the most can be the ones you need to fear.